A bombshell report claims that John Kerry held secret meetings with Iranian officials that undermined attempts by then-President Trump to engage with that country. Well, a member of Trump's personal legal team, Jordan Sekulow, has been digging into that story, and he joins us now with some more details. Thank you very much for joining us. So where are you on this? Because we did hear reports of this previously.
So we filed a Freedom of Information Act request to the State Department earlier this month, and we're likely going to court on April 5th because usually these government agencies don't produce the information. They try and delay and ultimately you've got to fight them in court for everything. But what we're looking for from the State Department is basically any kind of conversations where these people report. Was John Kerry reporting back in 2017, 2018, 2019. It was happening, Heather, until the Trump administration literally banned the foreign minister of Iran, Zarif, from coming to the United States. So we had the Obama energy secretary in meetings with him throughout years. We had Robert Malley, who's now back at the State Department as the special envoy for Iran, who was one of the authors of the Iranian nuclear deal meeting. So and Kerry, of course, who's also back inside the government now. But they were doing this at a time. Remember, they went after Mike Flynn for placing a phone call to the Russian ambassador as he was the incoming national security advisor. They were the entire time undermining the Trump administration's any kind of work they might be doing with Iran. And they were actually trying to make outreach. In 2019, that was thwarted. So under U.S. law, and not the bogus laws they tried to bring against Mike Flynn, there's some serious legal issues here that we need to get to the bottom of, but also just the truth about what was happening.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because the big threat would be if he was interfering with foreign policy initiated and followed by the United States government and the Trump administration. But do you have any proof, or what kind of proof would you have to prove that he was interfering and not just one of these social butterflies that happens to be all over the world?
So someone as influential as a former Secretary of State still taking these meetings with a current Iranian official. So Iran is unique. It's a country where everyone is there's heavily sanctioned on the officials, on the country itself. I mean, you can get yourself in real trouble if you try to do any deals with Iran outside of being a U.S. government official. So the reports are, and this is what captured our attention and why we decided to follow up through this and go through the slog that is fighting the U.S. government for information on this, is if they were doing it, and because the timing and the actual reporting says they were doing this to tell the Iranians don't do anything with Trump, and you know, we'll let us kind of come back to the table in 2021. I mean, they were being very bold about that. So I think that they just they don't think it matters. They think that this idea of undermining Trump, undermining administrations like this is normal business. But I think with everything that happened to Mike Flynn, it should be pretty infuriating to people that for 3 years, they were knowingly meeting with Iranian officials every time they had a chance about going back into a nuclear deal, which, of course, President Trump got the United States out of.
So, Jordan, based on where negotiations stand now with Iran and the nuclear deal and seeing what's transpired, does that lead you to believe a little more strongly some of the conversations and the content of the conversations in these meetings over these 3 years?
Yeah, I think it was all about how do we get back to this deal. Okay. So how do we get it back through Congress? How do we get back the money too? So Iran was heavily sanctioned under the Trump administration. They were hurting, and I think they were vulnerable. And there was a time when that was good for the United States, vulnerable to making a deal that they may not have made in the past because of how economically isolated they were. And the Abraham Accords, where we were making deals with the Arab Gulf states, and Israel was putting more pressure on Iran, the F-35s going into the Gulf states, all of that combined together. But yet John Kerry and the former head of our nuclear energy, our energy department, and the guy who's now the special envoy to Iran back at the State Department, were having meetings the entire time. What would they be talking about? Why would they have those kind of ongoing dialogues? And that's what we're getting to the bottom of.
Let me ask you, who is active in the lawsuit? Because you're no longer in the government. The president's no longer,
sure.
Former president's no longer president. So who is taking an action against whom?
So the U.S. government, passed this law, Freedom of Information Act request, and states
Sure.
have open records. People might know. They don't ever comply with it, though. So they passed these rules that are supposed to be that anybody can ask for this. And news agencies do it a lot, organizations like the ACLJ. But
Right.
if you're not a legal organization, you get nowhere. And so what we're able to do is usually narrow down and find the needle in the haystack, which leads to what Heather was talking about, what is kind of the conclusion and getting you from A to B that you're not going to find in the news reports, and that's what we're looking for here. And it can take sometimes months, but you're taking the State Department and basically saying, you know, what was going on? What did you know about these meetings?
So you're collecting information now.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Got it.
Because then we can put together pieces. What did you know about the meetings that John Kerry was having? Because was there a coordinated effort with current government officials? And then of course that informs us about moving forward too, because Congress will play a role again in any kind of re-entry of a nuclear deal.
Right. And then any possible legal implications for a lot of these folks who are in the current administration. Jordan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Heather. Thanks, Bob.
Right.